All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Altitude. I am Woody Woodworth. Really awesome episode today. We are going to learn all about sovereign cloud from a deep expert in this topic, Remco Niesten. Did I get your last name correct?
Yeah, it's so in English pronunciation, it's pretty okay. Yeah,
and he's joining us all the way across the pond from the Netherlands, which has been your home for
my life.
Yeah, good deal. So Remco, tell me a little bit just about yourself. You work for a outfit called Uniserver, right?
That is correct. And I've been working there for over 20 years now, which is pretty much all of my career almost. And I've known the company since I was still at uni. It's founded by an old classmate of mine, actually. So this is why I have a long history here, and it's still fun to work here.
Excellent. And I know we were talking before the episode, you said that in your 20-year career at Uniserver, you've done just about everything in terms of the technology stack, right?
Yeah, well, pretty much. So it means I have a technical background as a system engineer, as a network engineer, as a security specialist, I did a lot of technical stuff, and all the technical disciplines we have in the company is something I have touched in the past in some way.
Now, Uniserver specializes in sovereign workloads and sovereign workload hosting, right? So Uniserver builds and maintains and optimizes infrastructure for sovereign applications and customers that need to run applications specifically. And by sovereign, we'll get into that. But in your context, this is for customers that need to run workloads that abide by EU legislation. Is that correct?
It's not really the only reason people come to Uniserver. And so we are a private cloud / sovereign cloud infrastructure specialist in the country.
Okay.
Probably the biggest of its kind in the country. And we run a pretty big VMware-based platform to run virtual machines in multi-tenant environment. And we've been doing that for the past 15 years.
Wow. Do you provide any PaaS or SaaS services for your customers, or do you find they mostly just want to run IaaS on the VMware platform?
Pretty much the most of it is IaaS. SaaS and PaaS. So we offer services in that department, but it's the core business is IaaS.
And in terms of where these workloads, where the VMware infrastructure is actually built and hosted, is this needs to be in a specific place, right? You can't just put these servers anywhere because of the sensitivity around the sovereign workload. So it needs to be somewhere on EU soil. Is that correct?
It depends on the data and the classification and all the legislation that falls around it. So we also have customers that just want to have a feeling that their data is within the country. Other customers want really, if they need to call a service desk, they like to speak to a Dutch-speaking engineer.
I see.
And really a lot of customers just like us. So they tend to stay, and because the pricing and the availability is great. If you run IaaS workloads in the Netherlands, it's pretty much okay to run it on our platform. Also,
we were talking before the show about the kind of different definitions of sovereign. And for our listeners, I think it would be good to kind of step through those. And, it depends on the country you're in and the workload you're running. But for example, in Germany, their concept of sovereign can be different than the concept of sovereign in the Netherlands and so forth, and how that data is secured and privatized. Walk us through some of those differences.
Well, I think first of all, it's good for non-EU people listening and watching this podcast to understand there's legislation coming from Brussels emphasizing the need for sovereignty of your data. This is becoming a bigger and a bigger topic within the EU, and some other countries like France. They've been protective of their data more than we have been in the Netherlands. So they're different in that department. But overall, within the EU, there's really a growing thought. There's legislation coming, and there's growing concerns about data sovereignty. So the topic is becoming bigger.
How does one design your technology stack, without giving away too much of your secret sauce, to cross all the T's and dot all the I's and fit into the data privacy requirements that, say, the EU might demand? Is it about physical security? Is it about digital security? Is it about the kinds of access policies around the data that you provide? So zero trust might come up quite a bit for you. Is it a combination of these things? I guess what I'm asking is how complicated is it to really build and maintain this stuff?
The complication lies within the people that actually touch the data and the systems that everything runs on. So sovereignty is about everyone that can touch the data and the systems falls within legislation, EU legislation. So there's no contradictory legislation coming from the United States or from China.
I see.
So that's really what sovereignty is about.
And I know this is kind of a sensitive topic. As a non-EU citizen, as a citizen of the United States, I do not understand EU privacy law as well as I do stateside privacy law. And just because, I don't work in an EU medium or an EU sphere of influence, is it fair to say that a lot of the EU law is more deeply focused on data privacy to protect the consumer compared to, say, stateside law or Chinese law? Is that correct?
That for sure is a fact. Yeah.
Yeah. And so a lot of this has to do with kind of corporate oversight or government oversight, so that if there is a request that comes from outside of an EU zone or outside of an EU sovereign space, that the EU laws can kick in and say, you actually by law don't have rights to get to that data or see that data.
Yeah, that is correct.
Or if you need to, you have to follow a process.
There are certain rules that have been made in the past. So we had before a thing called safe harbor, which was really the EU allowing EU companies and citizens to put their data, privacy sensitive data, on United States soil, for instance.
Okay.
But that was taken down by basically by a privacy activist from Austria, Max Schrems.
Interesting.
So they invalidated the safe harbor principle. Then came Privacy Shield. That got invalidated practically by the same guy last year in the summer. And now there's a data privacy framework, and it's really a matter of time, probably before it gets invalidated again. So which basically would mean that it's illegal for European companies to put data that is privacy sensitive in another country like the United States.
So who is this individual again? This name is new to me.
Yeah, Max. Yeah,
keeps invalidating this idea of sovereign data off of actual EU soil. Who is this individual?
The guy is named Max Schrems.
Okay.
He's an Austrian lawyer and privacy activist.
Okay.
And there have been lawsuits really led by him, and it led to problems in legislation. From
the outside in, he appears to be very vigilant about data privacy within the EU context, and certainly doesn't want to give an inch in terms of where that data can reside. He's kind of, to use this term in a classic sense, kind of conservative about where that data needs to reside.
So here comes a difference between the European countries as well. So the Dutch economy is pretty much open. So the average Dutch company uses Microsoft 365 portfolio practically completely. So there's really a big question about what companies are going to do if sovereignty is required for certain types of data, because practically everybody uses Microsoft Office in the Netherlands.
Right.
So if sovereignty is going to be required by certain laws, how are companies going to react to that? How do you have to deal with that?
Yeah, that's a question I wanted to ask. We should get into that. It seems obviously like a big, important space. I mean, think about all of the economic activity that is centered around the EU, the trade, the commerce, the business, right? And then the government of the EU itself and all of its offices and the data that produces. It seems like companies would want in on that market, specifically the big CSPs. So, AWS and Azure and GCP and so forth. Do they not have offerings that fit within that sphere of compliance?
Yeah, they do. There's joint ventures with local engineering teams managing Azure environments, for instance, or AWS environments. There's quite some initiatives really to offer a kind of sovereign kind of Azure or sovereign kind of AWS. They are there, but really the question boils down to which people can actually access the data still. So where's their company headquartered?
I see. I see. So there's that, just like you said at the beginning of the podcast, that kind of comfort level where people that are your customers, part of the appeal is just, this is on Dutch soil. It's maintained primarily by Dutch entities, and there's a comfort and a trust with that is maybe more difficult for other companies to earn.
So there's going to be legislation called NIS2, cybercrime resiliency, to increase that for European-based companies. So that's going to be a law. There's also a certification under the name EUCS. It's not finished yet, and it's also not known how it's going to look. So there's going to be 3 levels of certification. So we want to aim for the high level, but there's talks about a certain high plus level, which requires that the cloud service provider is headquartered essentially in the in the EU.
I see.
So if you want to reach to the high plus certification level, that would mean that you cannot have this if you are AWS or any other United States headquartered company. I'm curious about what's going to happen there.
Yeah, you mentioned like 3 or 4 different legislative initiatives that are coming down the pike. I mean, how soon are these going to land? Is this a 2024 thing?
NIS2 is going to land in October this year.
Oh, wow.
There's probably an implementation period, and then it's going to take a few years before auditors actually want to enforce things. Yeah, and so EUCS is not a mandatory thing, but it might be something like ISO 27001 that the market is going to make it mandatory for you.
Do you feel that cloud shops, by cloud shops, I mean enterprises that are running their workloads in the cloud and part or whole or whatever, do they have their arms around NIST and some of these changes coming up? Or is it going to be kind of a mad scramble? Like as soon as this stuff goes live, then people are going to be running around kind of wild-eyed trying to figure out how to make it work.
Every self-respecting company that does something with IT in the country, that the people that I talk with, they all have this on their radar.
Okay. Yeah. So what does that mean for network design and network security design? Does it mean additional firewalling, additional visibility or controls, additional encryption? Like how does that break down at the real brass tacks level?
Yeah, if you look at the EUCS certification on the higher level, so it's mandatory to encrypt data in transit. So that, for instance, is really a good thing that within Aviatrix, it's done automatically for for all transferred data within the fabric, right?
Yes. While we're on the topic, I will say that at Aviatrix, our mantra or mindset, whatever you want to call it, has always been encryption all the time, end to end, everywhere.
Yeah.
So that there isn't any piece or part of your infrastructure that is unencrypted. Now, there are designs we offer where you can turn encryption off, but the default state of the platform is encrypt end to end everywhere all the time. Kind of set it and forget it. And then part of the attraction there is, the speeds and feeds we can get help negate some of the difficulties customers have with end-to-end encryption and bottlenecking and so forth. Certainly, Aviatrix fits well into that paradigm of just end-to-end encryption. So do you see Aviatrix coming up in some of your designs or customer conversations?
Not too much, but I think it's really because of the companies I speak with. So they usually make a decision to go either sovereign/private or they go to public. So we believe as a company, as Uniserver, we believe in a hybrid scenario. In a hybrid scenario that should help you. It should not hinder you to decide per type of data, per type of workload, where that workload should land.
Right.
So we believe in hybrid scenarios, and we believe that Aviatrix technology can help in that department. But in practice, I see companies choosing either type of cloud on their own because I think it's too complex, maybe, or
yeah. Hybrid is where things get super messy, especially with sovereignty, right? There are many heads and faces to that. I do have experience in that realm from previous jobs and engagements. I really would take it on a case-by-case basis and look at the individual workload or application and the individual business as opposed to trying to kind of create some kind of boilerplate or blanket hybrid architecture. Every sovereign hybrid architecture, in my experience, was very much a snowflake. But there were some common tools and patterns that you could kind of bring to the table into encryption, IPsec, VPN, the ability to have a contiguous, centralized control plane for your network and security policy. These things were very helpful because it was about which data resides where and whether that data is okay to move out of a sovereign space as long as it's not at rest. So, for example, it was okay to have parts of the application in non-sovereign spaces that were interacting with sovereign data. So you could have, say, a front end in AWS or something that was off EU soil. But as long as the data was kept at rest in a sovereign space on EU soil, that was acceptable. What do you think about all that?
No, I think each company should decide where workload has its best fit. To touch on that, if say you own a hospital or you're the IT department in a hospital, you have very privacy sensitive medical data that is probably not allowed to leave the country or leave the EU. So it's very sensitive, very protected. But also, you want to make use of the highly scalable functionality in AWS for maybe content delivery or platform as a service services, or you want to maybe to educate your patients on procedures that they have to undergo. And you put that information also with videos, you put it in AWS, let's say. And also there's a patient portal where they can make appointments, they can change their appointments, etc. But as soon as they touch in a patient portal, a place where they want to see their medical data, the medical data cannot be in AWS. So there must be ways for certain workloads to be able to mix, to be there in a hybrid scenario. Some stuff you want to put in public cloud, and other stuff you want to keep on your own soil.
Ooh, well, yeah, absolutely. From my mind, again, spins to how this would look, on the Lucid chart or Visio diagram in order to really have tight boundaries around these different network spaces, VPCs, VNets. I mean, I would certainly want a default kind of network and routing segregation between these workloads. So I would put, say, my medical sensitive data in network spaces that had little to no routing connectivity to other kinds of data.
You want to be in control.
Yes.
And so that is where Aviatrix comes in. So if functionally wise, all functionality is being offered within a VMware environment,
right,
or anyhow in a sovereign cloud environment, you are really in control and you have a lot of visibility.
Yeah, Aviatrix does have a secure edge device which sits right in the VMware stack and can plumb VMware workloads right into the rest of the Aviatrix cloud fabric, which is running in various public cloud or private cloud infrastructures. So that is super helpful for sure. And then you get all of the control and visibility through that you would in the standard platform.
Yeah, this way we see a lot of possibilities to offer this, but in the end, we don't speak a lot of those possibilities yet.
Well, hopefully it will be coming soon. Any other final thoughts that you would like to share with our listeners about the future of sovereignty and what you see coming in terms of trends? Is it still going to be very much about, building IaaS and doing it in the traditional way, or do you see any changes coming around the corner that might be significant?
Technical changes or legislative changes?
Let's do technical. I mean, you've talked a lot about the legislative stuff coming, which is super informative, but I guess what I'm gunning for is, do you think VMware, and this is again, a touchy question, do you think VMware as a platform is going to stand the test of time for this kind of thing? Or that people are going to push for different kinds of capabilities beyond what VMware could offer? Not to slight VMware. I mean, obviously it's a phenomenal platform. It's been around for decades and decades, but I'm just wondering if that's enough.
A lot of it is going to depend on what Broadcom is going to do. So they got acquired, of course. I do see that Broadcom really has a very clear vision towards, or seems to have a clear vision towards sovereignty. The technology is very mature, and it helped us to manage a sovereign cloud platform with the people that we have here in the building. A staff that has not had a need to grow exponentially. So it's really a linear growth almost, if you look at the staff. So the technology is very good. So AWS and Azure, they have a very broad portfolio of platform as a service offerings. And there's not a cloud service provider of that size with that of a broad portfolio in Europe. So if legislation comes by and says, okay, a lot of workload needs to stay sovereign, it would be logical to use VMware technology for that. It depends on technical innovations that are coming. And I'm not sure about what's going to happen in that department. But we do see still a lot of workload coming from on-prem scenarios, all virtual machine based, coming to our sovereign cloud. There's really a lot of talks with us, really, for companies that want to get rid of their own cloud infrastructure that they still own themselves. What that is not part of their core business to really have or use. They just want to put our workloads on a cloud platform.
I guess I'm thinking more about my question and what was kind of behind it. Really, it's about containers for me and agile workloads. And sorry to sound ignorant, but I'm 99% sure containers runs just fine on VMware, right? Because you deploy your CentOS or your Ubuntu or your whatever core Linux platform you want, and then you use your container ecosystem, be it Docker or Mesosphere or whatever, and it's blissfully unaware of VMware. VMware's 2 stacks down or something. So, do you see a lot of containers coming into to your cloud infrastructure?
Not so much yet. Not yet. We do have an offering for that ourselves. So we have a managed container platform offering that runs on top of VMware, of course.
Okay.
But I think it has future because it's also a good technology really to stay away as much as you can from vendor lock-in. It makes workloads portable, and it's scalable, so and good to manage. I think I agree with you on that department.
Well, Remco, this has been super informative and very helpful. Thank you so much for your time. Good luck and Godspeed with all of this crazy new legislation that's going to be hitting you soon. I'm sure you're going to be a very busy man, but it sounds like Uniserver is doing phenomenally well and offers a really important service in the sovereign space. So for all of our listeners that need to focus on sovereign workloads in the EU, Remco is your guy.
Call us. We'll have a chat.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Okay. Thank you very much.